I'm Liz Faublas, and this is Currents. The tales of catastrophe of Hurricane Sandy have been told by people struggling to survive and to recover. Pictures have shown the destruction, devastation that is beyond description by mere words, and politicians are also weighing in, putting out some hard numbers that tell the scope of the disaster. In many ways, it is worse than Hurricane Katrina, Governor Cuomo says, when that hurricane struck the Gulf Coast 7 years ago. 214,000 housing units were destroyed or damaged. In New York, during Sandy, 305,000 units of housing were lost to damage or destruction. As for businesses, Louisiana had nearly 19,000 take a hit during Katrina. In New York, the number is more than 265,000 businesses. Regarding the power problems that made life so miserable for so many following the storm, the outages from Katrina numbered about 800,000. In just New York, 2,190,000 customers lost power. And as of this moment, about 25,000 city residents are still without electricity. The governor is requesting the federal government send $42 billion in aid to New York, $33 billion for repairs and rebuilding, $9 billion to prevent this from happening again. Now, of course, Governor Cuomo is not alone in his cry for help. New Jersey's Governor Chris Christie is asking for more than $29 billion for his state. Meantime, one of the most notorious agencies caught up in the storm is LIPA, the Long Island Power Authority. Almost all its customers were without power immediately after the hurricane hit, and restoration of service has been agonizingly slow. The authority has not hesitated in sending out new bills to all of its customers, though, even to those still without power. LIPA is estimating the bills based on energy used from the same month the year before. A spokesman says, as an alternative, customers can do their own meter readings, but she admits conducting a meter reading is difficult. Meantime, 2 more resignations handed in at LIPA, a board member and the man in charge of customer service. And on Staten Island, some relief for Catholic families following Sandy. The New York Archdiocese is announcing that more than 24 elementary schools and 1 high school in other parts of the city may be shut down in June. But the new list does not include any schools on Staten Island. Talks are underway to assess the impact of the hurricane on the schools there before any decisions are made. The closings are part of Cardinal Dolan's plan to replace parish schools with regional ones. Meantime, the new cardinals of the church this morning in Rome spent more time with their families and with Pope Benedict.
The Pope individually greeted and congratulated all 6 new cardinals before they headed back home. In fact, the Pope also met with their families.
Sono pertanto lieto di accogliervi anche quest'oggi, in questo incontro semplice, familiare, e di rivolgere il mio caro saluto ai neoporporati, come pure ai loro parenti, amici e a quanti li accompagnano in questa circostanza così solenne e importante.
The gathering was short but also very moving. Outside the Vatican's Paul VI Hall, the new cardinals described their experience.
It's all one long occasion, an event of thanksgiving to God. I'm not even afraid, even though the challenges are high. You know why I'm not afraid? Because I have learned in my many years serving the church that God will never send us anywhere if He will not accompany us with His grace. So I am going happy and confident by God's grace.
This is a new mission for us, for the church in India, for the Surah Malangara Church. But again, it is reconfirmed with the presence of so many people from the different parts of the world, telling us that the church is one, holy, Catholic and apostolic.
This gesture of the Holy Father stressed the importance of Christians in Lebanon and in the Middle East. So after my appointment by the Holy Father, I've lived these days full of joy. Strengthened by God's grace, I've seen growing confidence in my mission and the challenges we face in the Middle East.
Colombia's new cardinal, Ruben Salazar, took the opportunity to reflect on the future of his country, especially when it comes to violence.
Every single Colombian is always in my prayers. I'm convinced that God will bless us with peace. I'm hoping that the negotiations taking place right now between the government and FARC rebels will put an end to the conflicts. Then all Colombians will be able to work towards a country where no one is excluded or marginalized, a country where we can all work for the good of others.
And from the Philippines, 55-year-old Cardinal Tagle from Manila got to enjoy the moment along with his parents.
It is a grace. Some of the cardinals approached me and they told me that their parents are no longer here. And so it's a real blessing that my parents are both healthy, and my brother is here too, and many, many relatives to witness this event. No, and it is not a grace and a blessing only for me and for our family, but for the church in Manila and the church in the Philippines. But we also know that this is a calling for us to live up to the calling of mission.
And now the 6 princes of the church will head back home as cardinals and as collaborators of the Pope.
Well, the new cardinal from Nigeria heads home with a heavy heart. He's condemning the terrorist attack on a Protestant church that killed 30 people in his homeland. Cardinal John Onayakin says the great tragedy is particularly worrisome because the church was located on an armed forces command base. Christian politicians in Egypt are joining protesters complaining about President Mohamed Morsi's seizure of near absolute power over the country. The Christians stepped down from a panel that's supposed to draft a new constitution. Morsi has held some meetings with Egypt's judges, but he's showing no sign that he'll back down from the stance that his behavior as president is not subject to any oversight. Opponents argue that he's placing himself above the law. 4 days of protests have left 1 person dead and more than 400 injured. The body of former Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat has been exhumed. In a ceremony outside his mausoleum in Ramallah on the West Bank, Palestinian leaders placed a wreath. The authorities there went to determine if Arafat was poisoned. Traces of a radioactive substance were recently found on his clothing. When he died in 2004 in France, the cause of death was ruled to be a stroke. Now, Swiss, French, and Russian experts will study samples from Arafat's remains to see if poison caused a stroke. Some Palestinians claim Israel was behind Arafat's death. Israel denies that. After the samples were secured, the body was reburied. Test results are expected next year. The bodies of many well-known people have been dug up in the course of history and for many reasons. For example, the body of 17th century English statesman Oliver Cromwell was exhumed during the Protestant Reformation so that the corpse could be beheaded. And the body of Haile Selassie, the last emperor of Ethiopia, was removed from its grave at the Imperial Palace when it was discovered the location was under a toilet. He was reburied in Trinity Cathedral, an Orthodox cathedral in Addis Ababa. Up next, the TV actor who says his show is filth, as Currents continues after the break. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Liz Faublas. Angus Jones is an actor starring on the television program 2.5 Men. He's 19 years old and plays the half in the show's title. He has some unusual advice for the program's viewers.
If you watch 2.5 Men, please stop watching 2.5 Men. I'm on 2.5 Men. I don't want to be on it. Please stop watching it. Please stop filling your head with filth. Please. It's you know, people say it's just entertainment. The fact that it's entertainment, it's do some research on the effects of television in your brain, and I promise you'll have a decision. You'll have a decision to make when it comes to the television, and especially with what you watch on the television. It's bad news. It's bad news.
The video was posted on YouTube by the Seventh-day Adventist Church where Jones worships. The show airs on CBS. No comment from them. Meantime, Rick Santorum, the former presidential candidate, has a lot to say about a new UN treaty. The Republican is worried the treaty covering people with disabilities could open the door for governments to intrude into family life and take the place of parents in caring for disabled youngsters. The U.S. Senate will take up ratification of the treaty before year's end. Mr. Santorum spoke yesterday in Washington. His youngest daughter, who suffers from a rare genetic disorder, joined him. One of the best times of the year for family life is Thanksgiving Day. The holiday is also an opportunity to serve, something that the Knights of Columbus do throughout the year. And this past weekend, the group brought food, friendship, and faith to the needy in Sunset Park.
And now, Lord God, we pray your Thanksgiving blessings on all gathered here, that they might all turn to you in thanksgiving for the abundance that you have given us all.
Today we're having our Thanksgiving celebration with the Zion Church. We get together, we're members of the Knights of Columbus Catholic Fraternal Organization. We donate food, vegetables, we come help and prepare for the less fortunate or anybody that needs some food or a little warmth.
We call it ENLP, or Ecumenical Neighborhood Lunch Program. And if I'm able, I hope God, we don't know how the future will bring, but I hope that I can continue as long as I can.
It's a very nice gathering. You meet these nice volunteers, you talk to them. What a great feeling to come and sit down and enjoy this wonderful meal with other people we know.
The Knights of Columbus, especially our council, Archbishop John Hughes, has helped the needy for such a long time. And one of our values is charity, so this is hand in hand. It works very well.
God calls us to serve our neighbor, and so we're serving our neighbor in every way we can. And this is something that we saw a real need for in our community, and we've been trying to address it ever since.
My family's lost so much from Sandy that Americans, everybody has to help each other in the way the economy is now, that we all have to reach out to each other to survive and to recover.
I always go, Jesus said, feed the hungry and see that they are fed. Even since a child, I like to see that all people are fed.
But we ask that even beyond this banquet, you grow in your trust of God, that God will be there for you no matter what you might be struggling with. Believe and trust that God is walking with you through it all.
I always come to the church here. Everybody's so nice, and they help a lot of people, in this neighborhood.
Thanksgiving, we're thankful for what we have, so we like to share some joy with other people that do need it. And it's a nice few hours that people spend.
I don't have no relatives in the neighborhood, so this is the only Thanksgiving meal that I get.
We have the Girl Scouts here. We have different people from different parishes help cooking.
It's awesome experience to see give people who don't have food that they could come here and they could have anything that they want.
For the Girl Scouts, it's to give back to the community and helping people. We bring the girls down to help prepare for the meal. We also make the decorations, and we do it for the holiday meals, the Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter.
It's beneficial for the people that, can afford to have a meal like this on Thanksgiving.
This program's been going on for 10, 11 years, and it's getting bigger, and it's helping a lot of people. The Knights of Columbus are proud of it.
The Thanksgiving weekend shopping may not have been as robust as one poll found. According to the National Retail Federation, 247 million Americans shopped over the weekend. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, the number of people in the country over the age of 14, 247 million. And that includes 250,000 over the age of 95. So, unless they all went to the mall, the poll is probably incorrect. Next on Currents, the challenges before Christianity facing the challenges of Islam. Details after the break. Welcome back. A decision by the Diocese of Hong Kong to provide paternity leave is causing consternation among Catholics there. The policy applies even to births that come out of wedlock. The church says the leave is intended to allow the father to better care for mother and child. Critics complain leave for unmarried men undermines church teaching on marriage. Resolving the differences between the Orthodox and Catholic churches has been the work of church leaders that has spanned half a century. The result, now a different and changed world.
Developments between the two churches have been remarkable in the past 50 years. And certainly the Vatican Council was important in encouraging greater relationships with other Christian churches, and especially with the Orthodox.
Well, in some ways, I think we're in a different world altogether. If you remember, back in the late 60s and early 70s, Pope Paul VI had several historic meetings with the Patriarch of Constantinople and also with other major Orthodox leaders. And then Pope John Paul II continued that in his time. And those were meetings that really were unheard of before that. We're living in a world where the symbols are very different. And I think where Catholic seminarians and Orthodox seminarians read each other's books, often will go to a liturgy in the church or the other. We're in a world where we take this in a way as one of the things that religious people do.
The important thing is, I think we have to recognize that the division between the churches took place over the course of time. Although we kind of identify some key dates in that process, such as 1054, when we look at the history, we know it took place over centuries. Now we're in the process, hopefully, with God's help, of healing that schism. And I think we recognize it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years. But it's a gradual process of reconciliation. So just as our division took place over time, hopefully our process of reconciliation is also taking place over the course of time.
Another new and previously unheard of step being taken by the church, the Vatican is participating in a Saudi Arabian interfaith center. Saudi Arabia forbids the practice of any religion except Islam, even in private. The center is named after the country's king. The Vatican spokesman says the forum's purpose is to foster dialogue among religions, and that's an urgent need today. Gaining a better understanding of Islam and the challenges it presents to us is the point of a new book titled Christianity, Islam, and Atheism. Earlier today, I asked author William Kilpatrick how our lack of knowledge about the religion can be dangerous.
We have the same problem as Europe. We're a little bit further behind on the river on the way to the falls. But in many ways, our problem is more severe because a lot of the problem here is stealth jihad or cultural jihad, which is hard to detect and hard to resist. A lot of Muslim activist groups paint themselves as civil rights groups working for social justice and so forth. In other words, they know the political buttons to push, and they know how to push the buttons about Islamophobia and racism and so forth. And as a result, they're making very rapid inroads, especially in Europe, but also here in the U.S.
Now, to be clear, in the book, are you referencing radical Islamists more so, correct, or those who have clearly displayed a predilection toward violence, terrorism in the name of jihad or so-called holy war?
Well, no, I'm not making much of a distinction because, in general, the aims of traditional mainstream Muslims or Islam, in other words, is the same as radical Islam. It's just a difference about means that's what's in question. So no, I mean, it's very obvious to spot the radical bomb-throwing types. It's a little bit more difficult to spot the ones who wear business suits and use lawfare instead of warfare to gain their ends. And there has been an enormous amount of infiltration of educational institutions, governmental institutions, that is largely unnoticed here.
And I think that the fear is with your book and with assumptions is that painting it with such a broad strokes might seem a bit unfair. What do you say to critics of, say, Christianity that argue that faith is not without its negativity, that they're judgmental, they're hypocritical, they're too political, painting that particular faith with such a broad stroke?
Well, I think you have to make distinctions. I mean, Islam and Christianity are two entirely different kinds of religions, and to draw a moral equivalence between the two is really to add to the obfuscation and the fogginess of the whole debate. This multicultural assumption that all religions and all cultures are basically equal and equivalent forces us really to lie about Islam and suppresses the truth. I think this is what the multicultural elites have managed to do. So no, I don't think, certainly in the history of Christianity, there are a lot of negative things, but the history of Christianity is nothing like the bloody history, 1,400 years of Islam. And you can see it today, when you see on the news that a bomb has exploded somewhere or a group of pilgrims has been attacked, you have a pretty good idea that it wasn't Christians that did it.
And William, I'm taking a look at some Pew Research here, and we always want to present a balanced opinion of our guests and what they're saying, and of course what is being said throughout polls that we've researched, and it shows that support for Hamas, in keeping with what you just said, support for extremist groups as a whole is down substantially in nations like Pakistan and Jordan, which suggests that in order to paint it with a broad stroke, you have to take into account that not everyone has this type of extremist notion about Muslims, Islam, and so forth. What do you say
let
to
me
that?
mention another Pew study that was done a couple of years ago in Egypt and in Pakistan.
Mm-hmm.
An opinion poll of the general populace showed that 78% were in favor of amputation for thieves, 83% were in favor of stoning adulterers, and 84% were in favor of murder for apostates, that apostates should be executed. Now, those are pretty extreme views, and yet majorities of the population in Pakistan and Egypt hold to them. Now, it may be that a lot of mainstream Muslims now believe that rather than go the violent means, you can get what you want through stealth jihad, and maybe they're switching their allegiance more towards the Muslim Brotherhood and groups like that.
Mm-hmm.
But once again, that it's very clear in Islamic scripture and Islamic tradition and traditional sources that one of the chief obligatory goals of Islam is to subdue and subjugate all non-Muslims.
And William, in the time that we have left, I just want to get your final thoughts on this. You say the intention of the book is to lay out practical steps that both Christians and non-Christians can take to push back against the spread of Islam. What are some of these steps, and how do they not cross the line of the acceptance that we teach in, say, faiths like Christianity?
Well, first of all, educate yourself about Islam, and once you've done, read all you can, find out all you can, read the Quran. And once you found out all you can, then talk with other people, inform your pastor, people in your church. The church itself needs to more fully inform Catholics about Islam. Unfortunately, the main documents, which deal with Islam very briefly, just look at the similarities. We worship the same God. We both revere Jesus and honor Mary, and that gives people lulls them into a false sense of complacency. Mm-hmm. So perhaps the bishops could issue an informational guide to supplement the really inadequate treatment in the catechism. That treatment's only 44 words long.
William Kilpatrick, author of the new book, Christianity, Islam, and Atheism. Up next, the Pope and prisoners, Catholics in the Congress, and the light show high over New York as Currents continues. The number of Catholics in Congress is growing. When the new Congress takes office in January, 161 Catholics will be there, 27 in the Senate and 134 in the House. That equals 30% of Congress. More than half are Protestant. 50 years ago, Protestants made up about 75%. Congressman Michael Grimm of Brooklyn and Staten Island is facing new ethics questions tonight. An ethics committee investigation of his campaign finances is now being deferred while a Justice Department probe goes forward, an indication the charges could be more serious than first thought. Grimm's lawyers say the committee decision is not a surprise. Meantime, the Holy Father is taking an active interest in the education and rehabilitation of prison inmates. As we learn now, he believes prisons shouldn't be just about punishment.
Benedict XVI met with a group of prison administrators who oversee the management of European prisons. In a speech, the Pope said that justice should not trump the respect and dignity of prisoners. The Pope explained that a prison sentence shouldn't just be about punishment. It should also be a time for rehabilitation.
The prisoner's personal need to undergo in prison a process of rehabilitation and maturation is actually a need of society itself, both because it stands to regain someone who can make a useful contribution to the common good, and also because such a process makes the prisoner less likely to reoffend and thus endanger society.
Italian Justice Minister Paola Severino greeted the Pope on behalf of the group. She said that Christian symbols found inside prisons actually help the inmates.
Una stanza spoglia nella quale c'è un altare e un crocifisso, ho avvertito quel senso di pace.
Before leaving, the Pope asked the directors to care for prisoners, and he also asked them to allow religious activities in prison.
Now, we don't believe the activities on the beaches of Sydney, Australia are biblical in nature, but the water has turned red, very bright blood red. Several of the beaches closed. Now, scientists say thick red algae caused the color change. There's no danger to humans, and it's a natural phenomenon, although not one you see very often. Something you've never seen before, a light show atop the Empire State Building. For the first time ever, the top of the building lit up in different colors in a rapid display of synchronized to the songs of Alicia Keys, including her hit Empire State of Mind. She flipped the switch to ignite the lights. The show was intended to show off the new LED tower display installed at the building. Alicia says she's a proud New Yorker and honored to have the chance to unveil the new lights and have a little part in the history of the Empire State Building. Well, that is all for tonight. Be sure to join us on Wednesday. We'll hear the call for vigilance in defending religious liberty by a cardinal from New York on Wednesday's edition of Currents. Until then, visit us online at currentsny.net. For all of us here at Currents, I'm Liz Faublas. Thank you for watching and have a good night.